Well, hello and welcome. I'm Guy Stevens, the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, and also your host for the podcast. I'm excited to have you here today with us. We have another exciting guest with us here today. So excited to share with you his story and experience. Before I get started, a little bit about the Alliance. If you're not familiar with who we are, the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was started just about 5 years ago. We were started really focused on the issue of restraint and seclusion in schools around the country, although our work has continued to kind of expand. And really, it's not just about restraint and seclusion. It's restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. Very often, the many things that are done to kids, often in the name of behavior and the outcomes that it leads to. In fact, we're going to talk about one of those outcomes today, which is the school to prison pipeline. Because what we know is that kids that are on the wrong side of a lot of punitive and exclusionary discipline very often end up becoming disengaged, disinterested, drop out, refuse to go to school, end up in juvenile justice system, end up in the criminal justice system, and the outcomes for many children are tragic and avoidable. So we're going to be talking today a little bit with Antwan Morris about the school to prison pipeline. Had the opportunity to meet Antwan, some time ago at another conference that I was attending as well, and we got talking about the issue of the school to prison pipeline. So we'll have an interesting conversation here today. But before I get started, some logistics. As always, we are recording these live events. So it will be available live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and on X. And you can go back to any of those platforms after the fact and watch it as well. We also do make it available as an audio-only podcast. So if you like to listen on the go and prefer to kind of listen rather than watch the video, you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple Music, wherever you get podcasts, and you can find the podcast there as well. And we do make transcripts available also on the podcast page. We do have a sponsor for our podcast that I want to share with you a little about today, and that is Supportable Solutions. Many of you may be familiar with the work of Supportable Solutions, and my friend and collaborator, Connie Persick, who I've been known now for some time and been working with for some time and collaborated on a new program with Crisis Prevention Institute with. But Connie also has some really amazing work that she does. If you are an educator and you've ever done a functional behavioral assessment, or you're a parent who has had a functional behavioral assessment done, you might not have been satisfied with the outcome. It might not really have led to what was going on or why your child was having a difficult time. Connie developed something called the Why Toolkit. And the Why Toolkit is all about getting to the deeper why, understanding why kids are struggling, and really coming up with a plan to help them. So I'm going to share with you kind of a brief intro here to the Why Toolkit, and then we will get moving on with our show.
Behaviors are signals to the deeper whys. The Why Toolkit, a tool built for and approved by teachers, parents, and administrators that can both assess and support individuals struggling with behaviors. Connie has created a document that turns typical behavioral documents upside down and replaces them with a deep dive into what really matters: how to support each child within a compassionate and relational framework based on their individual differences. The Why Toolkit was found to decrease seclusion and restraint by 21% in a year-long pilot study.
And the Why Toolkit is available now. And the great thing about the Why Toolkit is you can get a single seat if you want to. Of course, if you're a school or a district, you can get multiple seats for doing multiple assessments. But even as a parent, if you just want to kind of dive into it, understand what it's all about, the process it goes through, it's really affordable to get a single seat to take a look at that. So anyway, I encourage you to check it out. Connie is amazing, does some fantastic work. And it is something that, again, helps to get to kind of the deeper why so we can better support kids and ultimately have better outcomes. So with that, let me get to why we're here today and get to the exciting stuff. And that is that we have a special guest with us here today, Antwan Morris. And Antwan lived the stereotypical lifestyle of a young Black male growing up in the inner city. By 14, he'd essentially dropped out of school. By 17, he was incarcerated. Now, with 20 plus years of hard work, advocating, healing, and public speaking, he has changed his path and dedicated his life to helping today's youth heal from their traumas and create the lives they desire. And I had the fantastic opportunity to meet Antwan in Wisconsin, actually. I guess it's probably been about a year and a half ago now, if I'm thinking right. In fact, Antwan was co-presenting a session on the school to prison pipeline, which, as all of you know, that's an issue that we are quite interested in here at the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. That's one of the outcomes that we're trying to avoid, is getting kids moving in the school to prison pipeline. So when I'm at a conference and I'm not presenting and have an opportunity to go see a session, of course, the session that Antwan was doing stuck out at me as something about the school to prison pipeline. And I had the pleasure of listening to him and his co-presenter talk about the topic and share their experiences. And I think afterwards probably ran up with a business card like, hey, we should connect. And I think it was probably several months later that we ended up having a conversation. But I was really inspired by your story and the work that you've been doing. And really, I mean, it sounds like you're, as we were just talking a few minutes ago, it sounds like you're even into some really more interesting things as well. So I'm really excited about this conversation and just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we are just going to have a bit of a conversation today. I want to try to have you share a little bit more about your story. And of course, that's probably going to prompt some questions for me. But also, since we are live, we have a number of people that are probably already watching us across the internet. And if you are watching right now live, if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or even X, feel free to, in the chat, and you can do this right underneath the video stream, tell us who you are and where you're from. It's always a lot of fun to see where people are joining us from. You may recall, Antwan, I don't remember, but I'm located in Maryland, so I'm a little distance from you, but not too terribly far. But we have people typically from all across the world that will join in for these live events. And it's always a great opportunity to share stories with like-minded people that are on journeys trying to really improve outcomes for kids that really need help. So again, if you're watching live, feel free in the chat to tell us who you are and where you're from. It makes my day to see people saying hi. It's always fun to see our regular viewers who pop up and names I've never seen before. And like that, we have our first. We have a couple people popping up already. Here, Chantel. And Chantel is actually a volunteer with the Alliance. She's our lead volunteer in Canada. So again, all over the world, our neighbor there to the north. Chantel is somebody that's been doing amazing work to try to bring change to Canada. I've got Amy here from sunny California. And Amy has just recently gone from, I think, Connecticut to California. So going from one environment to the other. Great to have Amy here as well. So why don't you and I get started? Let's have a conversation. And really what I wanted to do is in your intro, we tell a little bit of a story, but it's a real little bit of a story. It's, you kind of say you had a stereotypical lifestyle. Tell me a little bit about, tell me a little bit about your journey. Tell me a little bit about, who you are and kind of growing up and the path that you were on. And so let's go back in time a little bit, if you will, and not as far back for you as it would be for me, but if you can rewind a bit and tell me a little bit about kind of your story.
Rewind to the 80s.
Okay, well then, I'm an 80s guy too. So,
so born and raised North Omaha, I guess partial North Omaha, back and forth between there and then different parts of like the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. A lot of back and forth there. School in both, both areas, both states. A lot of different schools. I think that's actually kind of what started. Just kind of the decline. Grew up. I mean, the stereotypical for anybody who needs understanding. It's gangs, guns, drugs, cops, things like that. Mothers, what do we call them? Boyfriends, spouses, just drug use, things like that, projects, so all the stuff that you would think would be a part of the stereotype, that's what I lived. My biggest issue is that I'm not a fan of like talking about myself. So when I get asked about like background and things like that, I never actually know what should I say?
Well, what was, so you mentioned some of the things already. And, of course, I'm sure with the work that you do in this area now, I mean, you probably have a lot of awareness about things that you wouldn't have had as you were growing up. I mean, things like the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, and I'm sure, kind of now, like going back in time and reflecting on your childhood, you probably had quite a few of what they would refer to as ACEs, kind of adverse childhood experiences. And there's you mentioned kind of the situation growing up. So potentially you're someone that through your school years, again, having had some exposure to some adverse experiences early on, probably carrying some trauma in, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Multiple schools. Just the stuff that we saw, the stuff that I saw growing up. Yeah, no kid should see. Actually, my early 20s, people used to, ask about, my childhood, and I'd say that I'd lived the life of a 15-year-old by the time, or I'm sorry, a 50-year-old by the time I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Just with everything that was going on, everything that we can see, everything in the neighborhood. So violence, things like that.
Right.
Just,
Yeah, and today I think more than in years past, I think there's a lot more understanding around the impact that has, right? And it's still not all the places it needs to be. I think it's a lot of people still don't understand the impact that some of these really significant and potentially traumatic experiences have. But I mean, what we know today is that this high degree of stress and trauma, and again, probably experiencing things that you wouldn't expect to experience as a young adult or teenager, or even before that. I mean, we know what that does. I mean, we know now that, like, that actually changes our brain, right? That exposure to stress and trauma, changes our brain in such a way that it actually leads us to be kind of hypervigilant, leads us to be a little bit more on alert, right? So these changes that occur lead to that. And of course, that then can lead to an increase in some stress-related behaviors, right? So people that have experienced a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, more likely to have behaviors that then, of course, usually get the wrong kind of attention. So, here's a kid that's been through a lot and is having a hard time, and maybe having some big behavior. But what happens in a school system is that very often it's greeted with compliance demands, it's greeted with consequences and punishment, and of course those things themselves can often even lead to bigger reactions and responses that then lead to more punishment and more trauma. And of course there's this really strong kind of punitive and exclusionary pattern of discipline that happens to a lot of kids, and again, especially kids that do have that trauma background, and it's not helping, right? I mean, it actually is causing more harm. Did you in school run into a lot of challenges in terms of kind of the things that you were having a hard time with, and how people responded to you?
Oh, definitely. And then looking back on it now, just see all the issues, right? Like everything they could have done different. It started in, oh my gosh, sixth grade, in that basement class. And I think that's what you and I first talked about when we met, or first time we met, in that basement class, kind of removed away from everyone, even the separate entrance, getting to that classroom. And
So you were moved into kind of a segregated classroom setting.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And they, I can't remember what they called it, but everyone's the behavioral classroom.
Yep.
It was the one class, every day, 5 days a week, same people, same everything. And kind of kept declining from there. If you're not getting better, or improving, then there's another school where it's essentially the whole school is the basement class.
Right.
And then that school has the quiet rooms and all that.
Yeah. So what was your experience in that segregated classroom? I mean, what were the typical, I mean, what I see today is that, very often when we have these classrooms, especially when you look at things that fall under, kind of, as you put it, the behavioral classrooms, right, which are often emotional I mean, I've heard emotional disorders, emotionally disturbed. This always bothers me because the truth of the matter is that these are kids that are often been experiencing trauma, yet we label them and often treat them in very punitive ways that make things worse, not better. I mean, what was the approach and what was the climate like in that environment? Was it helping you? Was it? I mean, what was the outcome of this?
It definitely didn't help.
Yeah.
The one thing that I remember, the first thing that pops in my head when you ask, was their level system.
Okay.
You know, the red, yellow, green. You know, if you're green, you know you're behaving. You know, you're on your way to mainstream, and just how quick you can go from yellow or green down to red, where you're pretty much starting all over. I think the whole class itself is a setup for failure. And parts of it, I can't blame the teachers. Like in the classroom, they're just trying, right? You know, but just
And not knowing what else to do, right? But today we should know better. I mean, you know,
we should, and that's
yeah,
why you're doing this, and that's why you're right. You know, just to educate, because
right.
that's really what they need. And then just a little more care, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's those levels. That's what I remember. I remember you were never really treated. I'm sorry, we were never. It's the distance in language. I was never really treated, or any of the other kids in the class, you know, like a regular student. It's just
yeah, yeah.
it just wasn't a good experience.
Right. You know, and you mentioned the point level system kind of approach, and when we wrote a piece on that a while back, you know, kind of talking about, we had a very specific example. So it probably doesn't make you happy to know that there are still schools out there today using these point and level systems, and you described something that we addressed in an article that we wrote about this, which is a point and level system was set up in such a way that you kind of had to earn your way back out into a general education setting or into a more inclusive setting or whatever it may be, that was used to earn the privilege. And of course, that's not legal.
No.
You know, I mean, the way that, especially if you look at the laws that refers to things like disabilities, you know, there are laws in place that should prevent people from doing these kinds of things. People have the right to be with their peers, and they have the right, sure, there are times that people may need other settings or in other environments, but the whole idea that you have to kind of earn your way back out kind of goes counter to what the law says in many cases. And, you know, these point and level systems can lead to really, I mean, yeah, you're taking a traumatized population and you're further traumatizing them. I mean, this idea of point and level systems and the shame, the blame, you know, I mean, I don't know what it was like in your case, but you know, in many cases, you know, kids that are going through these, not only do they, you know, have to maybe fill this thing out themselves or carry it around with them, but they've got to take it home, and then they get in trouble again. And, you know, I mean, it just creates this really terrible cycle for kids, and really can do a lot of harm. So where'd you go after that?
Harrison Secondary. One quick point I wanted to make here. So Rose Hill was a school that kindergarten and first grade. I'll never forget the guy's name, but he's probably passed on, so I can use it because we're talking almost 40 years ago. Principal Crawford. You misbehave, you reach for the sky, he's got his yardstick right in his office. And I've had my share of that. And we're talking, 6 years old. So
Wow.
Starting there, I don't know why, but I really wanted to put that out there. Where I went after Richfield Intermediate was a school called Harrison Secondary in North Minneapolis. And that is, like I said, like the basement class, but it's the whole school. And that school there, they're what they would consider you doing something out of line. You get put in that quiet room. And it was used a lot. And was I misbehaving? Yeah, right. I'm not innocent, but they shove you in there and you're sitting there for a while. And they'll let you out, and if you mess up again, they usually kick you out, you're suspended or something like that. But yeah, Harrison Secondary was the school. After that, I pretty much gave up on school.
Yeah. Well, and that, of course, is one of the things that we talk about a lot, about kind of what that cycle looks like. And I just want to pause for a second. And I'm sorry that you had the experience that you had in school. And as you're sharing kind of, the story, I mean, certainly, I guess it blows my mind in a way today to think that we still have 17 states that allow corporal punishment, 17 states that allow you to hit a kid in the name of discipline in schools. And like you, I mean, I had some experience. I actually went to a private religious school when I was very young, and of course they had a paddle. And I remember being in kindergarten and being paddled, by a grown adult for things that just wouldn't have made sense. But I mean, it blows my mind that some of these things are still happening. I mean, it's easy for me to look back and go, oh, that was a long time ago. But, we still have a lot of places that are doing many of these things. And there's a lot of mindsets around this that really need to shift. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that. And, again, talk about something that can be traumatic. The fact that, I can remember to this day getting pulled into the principal's office and getting paddled. You can remember, your principal with the yardstick. I mean, these are traumatic events, and we know better and should not be doing these things to kids. And it's, it's heartbreaking. But so you follow along to your story, and of course, you're getting, kind of put into a seclusion room now, and you mentioned kind of like, well, I was misbehaving, but truth be told, I mean, I understand you might have been having behavior that might have been disruptive, but you were a kid that needed help that wasn't getting help. Mm-hmm. What you were getting was not helping you to feel safe and connected, So, when we see behavior that emerges from a kid that really needs help, I mean, I almost feel like, hey, don't blame yourself here for that. Like, yeah, you may have had behavior, but you're a kid that is not being treated well by adults, and you've not had a safe place. And behavior, I mean, behavior is communication, behavior is biology, behavior is a response to, feeling safe or not. So, unfortunately, I think that, in your case, in the case of many kids, you weren't the failure. The system was failing you. And of course, the outcome that you're heading to now is you're saying that that you began to not go. I mean, is that what kind of happened next?
Yep. So I was there for, I guess, technically enrolled for 2 years. I did go every day the first year they had me in Harrison. And then we moved to an upstairs class. And that was about winter, I think, is when I stopped going. I was making some bad choices outside of school that ultimately led in me getting arrested at the school. And I remember actually being walked out, there's a bunch of kids there, all that. And then it's kind of dealing with that. I'd go to school, get kicked out on purpose, go to the Mall of America. There were some other mall rats there, and, we do all that, hang around there pretty much until it was time to go home, either right after school or later in the evening. That summer came around, I went back home to Omaha, and was, again, technically enrolled in school, but just didn't really bother going much. And that was kind of it until I wound up getting locked up, and went and did some juvie time. Mm-hmm. So up until the juvie time, my education, I think, was halfway through 8th grade, something like that. But then I wound up finishing when I was in Red Wing. Red Wing is the facility I was in.
And, so take me a little further. What begins to happen from here? I mean, you've gone down this path, which is the path that I think, I mean, this is why you're doing what you're doing. This is why we're doing what we're doing in terms of trying to end this, right? But I mean, it's a path of a kid that is on the wrong side of a lot of punitive and exclusionary discipline, is the wrong side of a lot of demands for compliance, is not getting the help that they need. They, feel like they're constantly being punished or corrected. They become disengaged. It's not a safe place. It's not a friendly place. I mean, who wants to be at school? I mean, of course, you want to go somewhere else if school doesn't feel like a welcoming and safe place for you to be. And then, of course, also often, I mean, I've got a slide that I use in presentation, kind of like, okay, this punitive exclusionary discipline happens, this engagement happens, they don't feel welcome. They don't, after that, juvenile justice, the criminal justice system. I mean, that school to prison pipeline is really alive and well. And I mean, it sounds like you were on your journey down the school to prison pipeline. So what happened at this point? So you end up in juvenile justice system. What's next for you?
After I got arrested, they put me on house arrest, the surveillance where you have to call, to go places, things like that. You have to sit in the house for a month. And then that summer came around. That's when I went back to Omaha. Didn't really get in any trouble there. Came back here to Minnesota, and wind up just making a bunch of bad choices. I stay away from the talking about the crimes because it doesn't really help or hurt anything, unless they want to hear. And that was actually the biggest charge was aggravated robbery. That's what landed me in Red Wing. Altogether, it was 1 week shy of 2 years. Most of the people that was in there at the same time either wound up going back or getting killed. I think I was one of 150. Two of 150 people or 150 kids that were in at the same time that didn't actually reoffend.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, that data seems to overwhelmingly be true. I mean, so often you find that, and I mean, to me, it's a travesty that we incarcerate as many people here in the United States as we do. We incarcerate more people here in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world, and very often, again, what we're really talking about are individuals that needed help, not consequence, I mean, very often these are individuals that had a lot of consequences, had a lot of trauma, but that's not what we're doing. And even in many of our prison systems, we're not really doing anything to help people to avoid that outcome of kind of the revolving door of coming back, right? So tell me, how for you did suddenly what was the change of direction? What kind of start? I mean, obviously, as we talk today, you're not in a prison, right? You're not incarcerated. So what was the shift here? What happened in your life to begin to shift things?
Red Wing. Doing that time in there, literally having to ask to get something to eat, to use the bathroom, things like that. Freedom obviously has been taken. That's kind of the whole idea. So not wanting to do that anymore. Also, just being removed from the life, the stuff that I learned in Omaha, brought back here and made a pretty bad name for myself. And knowing, honestly, just really deep down inside that wasn't me. The gang, the guns, the drugs, stuff like that. It really wasn't me, but that's what we did. Going to Red Wing and then having to go to a group home like right after Red Wing, the transitional housing.
And how would you have been here around that time?
Went to Red Wing 17, group home halfway through. Actually, I was pretty close to 19. So I was on an extended parole that they kept you on for until you're 21. So still technically a juvenile, legally an adult. So this, so from 17 to 19 is roughly that whole span. And then just not wanting it. And the group home they stuck me in was probably about 45 plus minutes, like kind of out in the country, like away. So just being removed from all those people who knew me. Being in Red Wing and being out there, life just kind of kept happening for them, which wound them up in the big house, and in the adult
Right,
prisons
right.
and in the grave. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, just I didn't actually think about not going back to that life. I just didn't go back to that life.
Right.
So for me, I would like to find someone to credit. There is no one to credit. It
Well,
was,
my brain is kind of going there because I'm thinking, I mean, what you're telling me is like you had this kind of revelation, like this is not what I want to do, not where I want to be, and I kept kind of thinking, like, is there another piece of this? Is there somebody or something that kind of like, it's the hero's journey, right? It's looking for that, like, what was that intervening factor that then led, and of course. What you don't want people thinking is like, oh, well, I guess that juvenile justice facility worked because it made you decide you don't want to go back. And of course, a lot of people probably leave a facility like that and think they don't want to go back, but they end up going back for a lot of reasons. So, you kind of had that resolve and you kind of made the next step. Where did your life go? I mean, what did you do? Because it seems like it's so easy to end up kind of falling back with, kind of the familiar faces and the familiar things that you're doing. How did you avoid that?
So I started actually, my mother called me asking about, old friends, like they knew I was going to be, getting out. And I told her, give no one nothing. However you have to do it, give no one nothing. And she did that. And when I got out of, or when I was able to actually move out of the group home, obviously I was working. I guess it's not obvious, but I was working. I went to school. Started taking classes at a community college. Idle time is the devil's playground. That I know, and I still.
What kind of classes were you taking?
Criminal justice is what I started off doing.
Okay.
And then it kind of changed, a lot. And then I went back to the criminal justice. And then I actually, after a couple of years, I started making really good money as a carpet cleaner. So I stopped going to school and just kind of kept, doing that. And really stayed in that industry for the last 21 years, still in the industry. Just kept myself busy.
Right. So I mean, it sounds like that, and we're all different and we're all affected, kind of from experiences in different ways. But I mean, it sounds like to a large degree, you had your own kind of reflection on this and was like, this is not what I want, and I'm going to do something about it. And it was that resolve that kind of put you on a different path, and you opted to make decisions to avoid the things that might have pulled you back into, where you were before. So, I mean, it sounds like in a way, I mean, you were the intervener in your own story in terms of, kind of that resolve that you had. And then you began going in a different direction. And of course, studying criminal justice and then your eventual career here as well. But of course, even at that point, upon getting started in your career, gosh, I mean, you had still been through not only the early childhood trauma that you likely experienced, but the trauma of kind of your teens and being incarcerated. And I mean, we're piling more and more difficult and traumatic experiences. Of course, those have impact. Was there a point kind of where you began to realize, like, gosh, this is a lot for me to carry around, and I need some help with all of this? Or, what was there any kind of reflection point on, some of the impact of the things that you had been through, in reflecting on where you were going?
The will to live. Honestly, the stuff that I was involved in, the stuff that I was doing both in Omaha and here, a lot of those choices should have landed me in the grave. A whole lot. So just not wanting, to
right, sure.
Honestly, the will to live.
And did you eventually get any kind of therapy or counseling or help for some of the trauma that you had endured?
I did, but that was 3 years ago,
Mhm, 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 mhm.
2 years ago,
Okay.
and I did the went to counseling. So my wife, we actually just got married in November. Both of our second. Um, Actually, really quick side note. Hi, Kaylin. That's my daughter. She sent a message. Um,
There we go. There we
there
go.
she is, and that's actually her as her bridesmaid in her bridesmaid thing in Florida where we got married.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
yep. uh, and then I lost my train of thought.
Oh, we were talking about kind of therapy, and you kind of went back to getting married, and you said about 3 years ago you
Yep.
started to get some.
Yep. So therapy. So my wife is a therapist, and
Mhm.
a pretty damn good one.
Mhm.
And where I come from, therapy we just don't do it. We don't
Right,
talk
right.
to the people, and I can explain that later if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to
Um,
hear your insight on that.
um, so actually, let's go through it now. So
Yeah.
the people, obviously mostly black, right? Where I grew up, and the cops, the teachers,
Mhm.
the judges, the social workers, are all white.
Yep.
So and my family, my elders, my mother, obviously that's who we learned it from. Just to not trust, the people.
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of stuck with me. Not kind of, that stuck with me my
Right.
entire life until I met Heather,
Mhm.
um, who's a therapist.
Right.
Right? And we talked about therapy, we talked about EMDR, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but
Eye movement, desensitize. Yeah, I always
yeah,
get it wrong. Yeah,
it's something like that. I'm
yeah,
guessing
yeah.
I'm going to get a text her of Heather telling me exactly what it means, or
There
Kate.
you go. Courtney can put something up in a second to
Yeah.
help us.
All right. So I did that, and that really, really corrected a lot of things because, like you said, the trauma, that it sticks with you, stays with you. Hypervigilance, everything that you mentioned, that's it.
We
Um,
got some help here. We got some help
and
here.
that's my wife.
Hey, Heather.
Um,
And of course, it's a pretty common approach for people that have experienced trauma.
mhm.
And in fact, we have a therapist that is on our volunteer team, and he actually did a presentation at one point talking about EMDR and the application even for people that have survived things like restraint and seclusion, because it is something that can be helpful with that. But I hear you on kind of even the acknowledgement. I mean, I think now even, I mean, we talk about this kind of mental health crisis across the country, but I think there's a lot of there's a lot of people with ideas and resistance and experiences that sometimes prevent them from getting mental health help that they might need.
Yeah. Um, I think doing so that's something that needs to be corrected.
Hmm.
Period. In the any community, not just in the urban, like
Right.
everywhere, because there's trauma everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, so staying away from the negative talk about therapy is going
Right.
to make a massive difference with kids anyway. Um,
Hmm.
and there's so much there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So tell me a little bit about, so when we met, you were giving a presentation on the school to prison pipeline. So of course, I mean, you were living the school to prison pipeline. I mean, you were, your story was woven right along that pathway. Um, how did you how did you how did you get to the point where you were actually not only the realization that you had and and let's be honest here. I mean, the effort and hard work that you put into um, getting onto a different path, which is notable. I mean, this is, I mean, this is something that a lot of people, as you said, I mean, they end up going on the wheel of being incarcerated, released, or end up dead. And of course, you didn't, and you ended up on a road that you had chosen, and were heading in a great direction. How did you then begin to reflect? And then, I mean, what brought you to suddenly speaking about the school to prison pipeline? Like, how did that happen? How did you go from the experiences you had to suddenly, like, I've got to share this, I got to do something? What happened?
So some of the counselors in Red Wing actually must have saw something, because my first presentation or first speech or first talk, whatever we're going to call it, was actually in Red Wing while I was still incarcerated.
Okay.
To the entire the staff, the campus, and then like a bunch of outside people. I did that. Actually got standing ovation.
Tell me about that presentation. What were you presenting?
That part I actually don't remember,
Okay.
like in its entirety. I just remember getting standing ovations, which kind of gave me a big head.
Yeah.
But we were talking, principles for daily living. Red Wing has like a lot of that stuff, thinking air based.
Okay. It looks like we've frozen here. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, so give me a second. Okay. I'm sorry. Well, we temporarily lost you, but you are back.
Yep. I'm actually just going to have my assistant bring up my backpack. I'm really sorry. This is so weird. My battery is dying on my laptop. I actually thought it was fully charged.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Do what you need to do. If you need to pause for a second, that's okay. We can. I had an internet issue earlier where my internet died on me while I was on a call. So,
hey, can you bring my backpack up, please? Thank you. Sorry about that. She's
no worries at all. We do these things live, and I love doing them live. But sometimes things happen.
Yeah,
but it's okay. We just kind of roll with whatever happens. That's why I told Courtney, like, if I suddenly disappear because my internet goes off, then come on, and you can be me. It'll be fun. So no worries at all. We'll get your backed up power backed up there. So so you gave some talks there while you were at Red Wing, and that kind of inspired you to. So how did that lead? You were saying kind of these principles for daily living were kind of the focus. How did that lead to eventually kind of deciding and ultimately talking about the school to prison pipeline?
Come in. Thank you.
And I'll let you get situated here. So you're fine. Grab your battery or whatever you need to get, and we'll get it all figured out.
So it went from Red Wing, and then we got asked to speak at University of Minnesota Mankato. And went and did that, speaking to the law enforcement and like the education majors and all that. There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Then when I was on probation or parole, whatever you want to call it, when I completed it, because again, very, very small number of people who actually complete the EJJ. So you're finished when you're 21, extended jurisdiction, juvenile is what it stands for. I was asked to come back a bunch of times to actually talk to the kids that were still on it, in different groups and things like that. So I did a bunch of that. And then Heather and I met sometime later, a couple of decades later. And she actually talked to me about it, asked if it'd be something I'd be interested in doing and all that. And like I said, like our first one, I hadn't gone through like all the therapy, hadn't processed everything. I actually can't remember if I'd even started therapy. So I couldn't talk about some of those things. But the school to prison pipeline, all of that stuff came from Heather.
So she heard your story, your experience, and then saw the value of you two collaborating to raise awareness about this and try to influence change.
Yep. Yeah. It just kind of all like worked out. You know, we
Yeah.
were dating, and then, you know, obviously, you know, you get to know each other, and that's how we learned.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That we'd be good
So
together.
tell me, what are some of your, you know, what are some of the key things that you would want to share with our audience about the school to prison pipeline? So, you know, what are some things that you think are really important for people to understand in terms of the topic of the school to prison pipeline? It's something we talk about here, you know, at the Alliance certainly, but I'd love to hear kind of your. Uh-oh. All right. We're having a little technical issue here, and just waiting to see if that technical issue resolves itself. So we'll give that just a second. Do notice if you are watching live right now that we've got some comments that have been put in the chat, including information about Heather's book, A Thousand Paper Cuts, A Therapist, a Narcissist, His Trap. So take a look at that, and hopefully we'll have Antwan back here in a second. There we go. It looks like we've got you back again. All
I
right.
don't know what happened there.
Oh,
So
no worries. I was actually just sharing Heather's book here while I was waiting for you to come back. What are some of your key messages? What are some of the key things you'd want people to understand about the school to prison pipeline, and how do we end it? All right. So it looks like we're frozen again here. So Antoine may be having a internet connection issue. We'll give it a second and see if it resolves itself, but it looks like we're frozen again. And
how are we doing now?
all right, so I can hear you now. There we go. Okay, you're back.
None of that made sense. I'm sorry about that. That actually there shouldn't have been any issues there.
Oh, no worries. These things happen. So some of your thoughts on the school to prison pipeline.
I think it starts, you know, at the youngest age we possibly can, and it would be the teachers and the school officials. Just maybe asking an extra question, paying a little bit closer attention, actually caring if you're going to be in the field. I'm sorry to say it, and it's very depressing to say it, but if that's a concern for the kids, the parents probably don't care, you know, kind of thing. I mean, they care, but not enough to put that extra time into it, right? So someone needs to see and notice these kids. Someone has to. The next people that's going to see them as much. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to respond to that because I was thinking, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong here, but you know, I think that very often we're in a situation where we have parents who unfortunately have experienced their own trauma and difficulty and challenges, and you know, it's the idea that, you know, well, I again, I mean, I think to simply put it, I think that you know, in many cases, we have this generational trauma that is kind of getting passed down from generation to generation. Of you know, and so I guess I'm always careful because I don't want to attribute something to somebody kind of family wise that I don't want to say that may be unfair, and I guess unfair just meaning that often these are people who have themselves been on the wrong side of a lot of things, and who have themselves are in the midst of, you know, it's kind of this idea that when we become dysregulated, when we're dysregulated, what happens to us? We become very reactive. We, you know, our thinking logical brain kind of goes out the window, and we're almost in like a survival state. And you know, I think that there are many instances where, you know, because on the flip side of that, we sometimes hear things like, well, putting blame back to parents. And I'm always concerned about that because these are parents that actually themselves sometimes need a great deal of empathy, who have been through a lot. So anyway, I was just kind of thinking about that as you were saying it. And you know, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of kids that don't have that secure, stable adult relationship. And, you know, the interesting thing and the important thing is, like, that can be somebody at school. You know, maybe that's not their job, but you know what? You can make a difference for a kid. You can be that one adult that clearly cares and supports a kid that otherwise is in a bad situation, and that can make all the difference in the world at times for kids.
Yep, it can, and I probably should have chose my words more wisely. Where I
No, no, I hear you. I wasn't meaning that to be critical. I was just kind of reflecting on it because I sometimes hear the negative side of it, like blaming parents, and it's kind of like, oh, but so often these are parents that really do need our empathy, and I mean, and the feel. I mean, it's like you almost hear it weaponized as an excuse, like, well, we don't control where they come from or where their parents or whatever the case may be. Well, no, but you control the thing that you can do to make a difference, and. And I never want adults to give up on kids because of this. Like, if anything, they should have more empathy because of these things. And sometimes it leads to less. And that leads to low expectations and looking at kids as behavioral challenges rather than like really trying to understand and support them.
Yep, and that's roughly where I was going, right? So if the kid isn't getting what they need, from the home or can't, or for whatever reason, the teachers, just pay a little bit more attention. Ask an extra question, things like that. So I lived this life that we're talking about. Obviously, that's kind of the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 19-year-old who was raised different than I was, right? So I've never been one to allow like excuses, things like that. Like I try to be the best parent, and to my I've got three bonus kids now, so I've got four, and do the best I can, right? Best possible, and that's the thinking that the kids that are dealing with it now. That's the thinking that those parents need.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have it, they haven't gotten the help, anything like that. I would like for the teachers, the educators, to pay a little, closer attention. There were situations that we talked about and that we still talk about in our presentations, where it was evident, that I had been, beat pretty bad, and there wasn't many questions. And this was from my mother, and there wasn't a whole lot of concern at the time for me. Sweet, they're not going to ask any questions. I'm not going to be taken away, and my mother's not going to go to jail, right? But hindsight's 2020, right? I'm not saying any of that should have happened, but maybe I wish that there could have been more questions asked.
Right. Yeah. And you're making me think about the quote that I use probably 5 times a day, which is the Maya Angelou quote about, do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. And that's part of your story, right? You were talking about like, well, this is what I went through, but in raising my children, this is what I'm going to do. I absolutely relate. I mean, hitting kids at home was a pretty popular thing back in the 70s and 80s. I think, again, I mean, we know better now for a lot of things. And when we know better, we can do better. I was thinking about an earlier conversation I had today with a school team, and somebody brought up a quote, which was, be curious, not judgmental. Right. And that's so relevant to what you're talking about. Like, it's really easy to judge. And when we judge, we tend to put people in different categories, and we tend to not look at them as a responsibility. When we're curious, when we ask questions, when we want to know more, we really become more empathetic. And when we become more empathetic, we're able to help people rather than just kind of push them aside, lose faith in their ability, have low expectations. And that makes all the difference in the world. Sadly, your experience a number of years ago, it would, I mean, don't get me wrong, but it'd be nice to think like this doesn't happen anymore, right? But it does, and the school to prison pipeline is alive and well. And in fact, I mean, we've had a challenging few years when you go back a little bit into the the pandemic, that we had this global pandemic, the world got turned upside down. The world became unsafe for kids. Like kids were afraid to go near people and they had to wear a mask. And, the stress and trauma people have been through in the last few years has been tremendous. The political divides that exist among us, these are tough times, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in tough times, while there are people out there that are talking about the things that you're talking about, the work that Heather's doing, the work that there are many people that are doing that are trying to focus on trauma-informed approaches and better ways of doing things, there are also those out there that right now are pushing for more punitive, exclusionary approaches. I think I shared with you earlier, I read a news story from my own school district this week that the superintendent was talking about the need for tough love, and the district, it turns out, is one of the highest in the states in referrals to law enforcement, and it's being approached as if that's a good thing. It is not. It is not a good thing. We should be doing all we can to prevent that, right? We should be doing all we can to figure out how we better support kids, not we're doing tough love and we're going to refer them to law enforcement. I mean, talk about school to prison pipeline. So it is upsetting to know that these problems are not only alive and well, but in certain areas, there are people that are doubling down on a lot of these things. So what advice do you have and why don't we start out? We have a broad audience here. What advice do you have for parents? What advice do you have for parents that, in terms of kids and, avoiding outcomes like, kind of the kind of the challenges that you had with kind of the school to prison pipeline? What advice might you have for families?
So the ones with the generational trauma, that dealt with the same thing with their parents. Right. My first piece would be therapy. Mm-hmm. These parents get therapy. I personally believe that you can't help your kids if you need help yourself. Right. It is very difficult. I really feel like therapy has made me a better parent. I have no idea. I just do the best I can.
Well, wasn't your daughter on earlier? We can take a poll.
She's probably still there.
That's right.
She's watching, and they're
probably. The fact that she's here and that says a lot. It really does. So
it does, right? So I mean, like I said, I just do the best I can. But that would be the first piece. Trauma, traumatic experiences, EMDR. Get that. I push that every single place, that where I can have a voice, is the EMDR, just because what it did for me, the major difference it made. I think so.
We have a really important comment here. You're a good dad. So, there you go. Right on time.
So that first, and then listening to your kid, right? So at this point, if the kids are already having the issues, chances are there's some lying and stuff like that. And eventually there has to be a clean slate. Offering that clean slate. We start over right here. Obviously, there's still going to be hiccups and stuff like that, but just offering that just to build some trust. If you haven't been a very good parent, but you've gone to therapy, but the kid is still, skeptical, obviously there's going to be a bit of a transition, but there will be success, if that makes sense. So therapy, working on building back trust with your kid so that your kid can trust you enough to actually tell you the truth. Punishments only go so far, right? So a kid is going to continue to lie if they already know the worst thing that can possibly be done to them, which is, a spanking, let's call it what it is, a beating, right? But building back trust, during and then after the therapy, I think would make a massive, massive difference.
Well, what positive modeling it is too. Again, I hear what you're saying, and if you're, coming to that realization that, I need help and I need therapy, but what good modeling that is for our kids too, to say, it's okay. It's okay to need help. It's okay. Our mental health is extremely important, and this is a priority. I mean, this is a priority, and I make it a priority for myself, and it needs to be a priority for you as well. I think that's really critical. That's fantastic. Fantastic advice. And of course, I think you had some really good, feedback already for schools, about, being curious and really trying to understand. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. So tell me a little bit. We shared a minute ago, as you were having the video problem, the link to Heather's book. Tell me a little bit more about Heather and Heather's work and the book. There's a book, 1,000 Paper Cuts: A Therapist, Her Narcissist, His Trap. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And I probably need to have Heather on the show sometime as well, right?
Yeah, I think you definitely should. She doesn't like when I do this, but there's nothing you can do about it now.
Yeah, that's right. This is live, and there's no change in it. So,
Heather, I'm giving her all of the credit, right? I always wanted to make a difference, right? With something with children that had the same kind of upbringing as I did. And I couldn't find it. And her suggestion, therapy, being a therapist, and it was like a bulb that just kind of lit up. Excuse me. So that's actually what I'm doing now is going to school for that.
I'm sorry, you're going to school for what?
Therapist, MSW.
Okay. Wow. Okay, fantastic. Well, and I always say that. So MSW, social worker. I always say that, like, therapists, counselors, social workers are like some of my favorite people on the planet because they tend to be the kindest, most caring people that you ever meet that are in it for the right reasons, right? They're really, I don't know. So anyway, I mean, it fits an arc for you, right? I mean, it fits this arc of, like, wanting to do something positive. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I get excited about social work and therapists.
You're exactly right. That's the thing. She wants, and she has made a difference in a lot of people's lives. Right. She doesn't take credit for it, and you have to. So her book. I don't know how much I should say, but it's her story of just spending 20 years. I have to tread. I would.
And we can have Heather on sometime to talk about her book. But and I will just say, I mean, I appreciate, sometimes it's these connections that we make to people that then, lead to kind of bringing out the best pieces of us. And it sounds like that's part of your story here. But there's this really great piece of you that was there and has been there for some time, even before Heather. I mean, although, Heather sounds like she's really helped to take you on somewhat of that journey, but it sounds like, you've always had that heart of a social worker, that heart of somebody that wants to make a positive difference. And, you did some really, meaningful and hard work to steer off the path that you were on, and put yourself in a different road. And now, coming back to, doing work to helping others, I think is just, a really important thing. There's a lot of kids out there that, need to hear your message, your story. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And, as Heather might say, don't sell yourself short. I mean, there's a lot there that you, and I'm sure your daughter would agree as well. Yeah. So, just make sure we get that in there.
She's obviously about an hour's drive away from me right now, but I can hear her saying, "Yes, I tell them that all the time." Kind of thing, right? When you say that, don't sell yourself short. I'm just not a pat myself on the back kind of person.
I get it. Yeah. This has been an interesting conversation, and I do really appreciate you, because I know it's not easy, even many years later, kind of sharing some of this, and I'm sure kind of traveling back in your head to some of the things that you experience. I mean, it's not easy, but I do think that our stories are important and they're powerful, and they really can lead to lead to positive change. So I really do appreciate you, kind of being vulnerable and sharing that story. And I appreciate very much the work that you're doing, and I know from having previous conversations with you that, initially, this was a hard journey, but, it sounds like the, kind of the help that you were able to get through therapy has further helped you to be able to kind of focus and do that. So I think it's fantastic that you had the connection and the support that you had to do that, because this is important. Mm-hmm. And, I think, I'm sure you feel, like anything that you can do to prevent somebody from ending up on the road that you were on. And, again, you're in a great place now. You're work. It sounds like you've got great kids and great wife and a fantastic relationship and a good steady job, and get to do some important things in terms of sharing your story and your message. And it's really great that you've been able to do that. But I'm sure that knowing that there's a lot of kids that are heading there in that wrong direction probably is one of those things that kind of keeps you going. And it's important. We've got to do this, because there's some kids out there. This is the reason that when I started the Alliance, after my son was fine and what had happened to him was over, and he was doing well. But there's so many kids out there that don't have anybody in their corner, and they're going to benefit from hearing your story and your experience. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks a lot for having me, man. It's awesome. This is awesome.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I guess a couple of things. Well, one, a couple of quick things here. Heather said, yes, sir. So agreeing with I think what I was saying, and yes, you should pat yourself on the back more. So know that you are valued and appreciated for what you do. Amy said, thank you very much for sharing your story. Absolutely appreciate you sharing your story. Anything you want to leave us with as we're kind of wrapping up here? Any final thoughts, final words? Anything you want to leave us with today?
I really just want to just pound it in there, asking the extra questions. If you know something isn't right, ask the question. It's going to go a long way. A little bit more of a push would have gotten me to talk after all the welts in my face, in sixth grade. One more question would have done it. Just a small push, and that's for me, headstrong, that whole thing. Just ask the extra questions. If I went through it, there's got to be a million other kids going through it right now. Maybe that's a big number, I don't know, but just ask that question as the teacher, school staff. For the parents, same thing. You guys have lived it, just not saying, and this was an excuse I used a lot. Well, that's how I was raised. That was life.
Right.
Everything, that was life. That is not life.
Yeah. Well, remember that story I was telling you about my school district superintendent said that it was talking about tough love, said something to the effect of that's how they were raised, and they had a lot of these really strong disciplinary things done to them. And look, they're okay. We hear people use that kind of logic to justify. Right. Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. I've heard people say, well, I was hit when I was a child and I'm okay. And I'm like, okay. So, I hate to see that. That's a great point.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it. It's, just because you're alive and you're walking around does not mean that you're okay, and it's not okay. I stay out of or avoid talking about other people like parenting and things like that, because it's their children. I am not completely against spanking. I just never had to do it with my kid. But there's a massive difference between spanking and beating. And if you go to hitting for discipline, period, I think that's an issue. A talk works. It works
Right,
well.
right. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that I mean, there's actually a pretty good pile of evidence around spanking that really shows that it can lead to harm, and you know yeah, I mean, things have changed. I mean, when I was a kid, again, it was something that was far more common, and maybe people never intended to do harm, but sometimes our impact can be quite a bit different from our intent. And I think the research on spanking, even in families, can show that it can really be harmful. And I guess again, it's just I'm not trying to judge, but it's like know better, do better. There's a whole lot of research out there about knowing better about this, and there's actually research that talks about how spankings can lead to poorer outcomes, like academically, and of course when we're modeling kind of, okay, when you don't do what I want, I'm going to hit you. Well, why is this kid so aggressive? Well,
Gee, I wonder.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it's a journey for sure. Amy just shared kind of your while you were giving your advice here, how powerful that was, and I agree. Fantastic stuff. So we are just about at the end of our time here, and I want to thank you. I know it's been, gosh, it's been a while since I think we first connected, and fortunately, or for better for worse, like when we book these out now, we're like booked a year in advance, so it's like kind of like we planned it, and then it's like, oh look, oh yeah, we're going to talk. It's been a while, but it's really been a pleasure to get to reconnect with you, and I greatly appreciate you sharing your story. So on that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here and let everyone go. This will be, of course, available for people to go back and watch on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and on X, and of course as an audio podcast. So I encourage people to share it. Share it if you're a parent. Share it with other parents. Share it with your school team. If you're a school team, share it within your schools. The more we can get out the message about some of these things, I think the greater we have in impacting change. So, Antwan, you can hang around for a second, but thank you so much, and we'll have to have you back again, and maybe have you and Heather back together. That might be fun.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you next time.